welcome to the Sugar and Spikes podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs, side hustlers, and anyone ready to uplevel their career in their own damn way. I'm Des. I'm a life coach for women who get that having it all sometimes means having to balance the good and the bad, the sugar and the spikes, and all the in-between.
And I'm Tammy. I'm a therapist, and I'm all about helping as many people as possible to build awareness and make meaningful changes in their lives. I'm also dedicated to diversity and inclusion and increasing access to mental health care.
Between the two of us, we have 4 master's degrees and thousands of hours helping people develop balance, confidence, and clarity on their terms. So let's get started. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Sugar and Spikes podcast. I am your faithful and trusty leader, Des.
And I'm Tammy.
Everyone's favorite co-host.
Oh, that's so nice.
Did you hear I got my Canadian on? Co-host.
Cool.
Or like Uber Midwest. I'm a little nervous that I'm going to pick up like a Midwest accent because it reminds me of Canada and I'm not as like opposed to having a Canadian accent. But then since I'm American, it's just going to read Midwest.
Yeah.
So I like occasionally like something will actually slip out. I'm like, nope, gotta rein that in.
You're like reeling it in.
Okay. So today is kind of, I don't know if it's necessarily like a special episode. We're going to be shifting gears a little bit and kind of getting into one of the core pieces of why Sugar and Spikes was developed, like the initial founding ideas, premises.
Yeah.
And it's super timely because of the couple suicides that have happened recently this week. And I say couple, like the well-known ones, right?
Right. So Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah. And specifically, and we started to kind of address this, and we prefaced it a little bit in the Ocean episode where we went to church and they were talking about the issues.
Right.
So we've been kind of leading into it, and then these things happen this week and we're like, no, like we need to do this. So it may not be as lighthearted, it may not be as fun, but Tammy and I talked and we're going to be doing 2 or 3 very specific pointed episodes, this being one of them, talking about entrepreneurship and mental health.
Yep.
Because it's something that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed in more than something you'll see on entrepreneur.com as a 4 signs type of list.
Yeah.
It needs to be addressed in a professional manner, and it needs to be addressed by people that have lived it a bit. Like, it's so multifaceted, and the way that I've seen a lot of things be discussed on social media, in the media, things like that. I think that, we've built this fucking platform and now is kind of a really important time to use it.
Yeah. And I think because it is so multifaceted, we're going to be talking in fairly broad strokes, but I think, to recognize that I think we wanted to start out talking about depression, and depression looks different almost every time you see it. So please know that our desire to include everyone, we do have to talk in kind of broad strokes about the topics more generally.
Knowing us, if our proclivity for saying, well, what about
that's
gets
true
to you, then maybe skip these next couple of episodes because that's probably going to happen a lot. So we're going to be speaking broad strokes, and then chances are each one of us is going to be like, but what about?
Yeah, that's a good point.
The other thing that I feel like we explicitly need to note, since we're talking about such serious issues, is we are trained mental health professionals.
Yeah.
We are not your trained mental health professionals.
Absolutely.
The information that we're talking about in this podcast is not intended to treat, diagnose, or like take place of any professional care.
No, and if you feel like you're in crisis, please call 911, go to an emergency department if needed, reach out to your local network, call the National Suicide Hotline. Reach out to those resources if you need them.
So all of that good legal stuff aside.
Well, and I really mean it too. Yeah. Maybe in the show notes we can provide
we'll put it in
some crisis numbers.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to think of like the best way to open it. I feel like I normally don't do this, but I think I'm going to do it.
Okay.
I'm going to very briefly kind of touch on my story a
Okay.
little bit.
Yeah.
Um, actually, let me directly read what I posted on Facebook. I feel like this is a pretty like decent start.
Okay.
My head's spinning. I'm a Kate Spade. I'm an Anthony Bourdain. I'm an entrepreneur who's been previously diagnosed with bipolar, anxiety, eating disorders, and depression. My arms are tattooed because of self injury scars. How I healed is not relevant to the conversation right now. The only thing that matters is that healing is possible. All the research is showing us that creatives and entrepreneurs are at significantly higher risk of mental health problems. Can we stop fucking acting like it's all sunshine, glitter, and unicorns? Can we stop telling people it's their mindset? Entrepreneurs have enough fucking pressure in society and in building their business that if they have an uphill battle with depression or anxiety, that taking the blame off of them would be really fucking nice.
Mm-hmm.
Society has an uphill battle with making life work, and no one should be blamed anyways. Um, so just gonna kind of like lead into that. That's where I'm coming from with all of this firsthand experience, training, and now we're here.
Yeah. I hope you got a lot of support on social media for that.
Yeah, everyone was very, very kind.
Good.
Actually, I got like one of the sweetest comments that I think like I kind of want to just like save it or frame it, but someone said, you were able to put my thoughts into words.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, but that's the thing. Like, I feel like as much as we've said on our podcast, there's a lot of stigma around.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard.
So hard.
It's hard to share like those pieces, and I'll do it like when like times call for it. Like I'm not one to bleed my story.
No, but it takes a lot of courage too.
So I think with that kind of like entryway, how do we want to we did not plan out how we're going to go into this.
Yeah. It's a little, that's kind of the way we do things, right?
Yeah.
Like planning. Well, we loosely plan.
What is planning?
Um, so I thought we could talk a little bit about depression.
Mhm.
I know you had been seeing some things on. Oh, no, I want to go back. I want to address what you said in your post about can we stop pretending that it's all like unicorns, glitter, and mindset. And
Mhm.
I really love that because I think sometimes the message is if you just think in the air quotes right way,
Mhm.
good things will come to you and everything's amazing and beautiful and
Mhm.
wonderful. And the truth is it can be really painful down there in the trenches when
Yeah.
things aren't working the way you want them to.
Mhm.
And you're right. Some people do have more of an uphill battle. They start in a different place
Mhm.
and um trying to cope with that can really take its toll.
Yeah, and I think one thing is like from the outside, and this is one thing, like I kept seeing a lot of people in relatively privileged positions talking about this, where it was like they just won't get the help, like referring to people they've known with depression and stuff, and it's just it's not a choice. Like there comes a point where you can't choose to think positively. You can't choose to like pick up the phone. Like it becomes so much more than just choose.
Yeah, I think that speaks to this idea that we have um kind of in mainstream culture in this country that if you just try hard enough and pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you're struggling
Mhm.
in whatever way that means, that
Mhm.
you can just improve yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's this whole idea that we're 100% in control of our life
Mhm.
and our decisions and our mind and our like
Mhm.
um and I think that I know we've talked about this before, but I think that that's false. And I think um that it kind of paves the way for this idea that like, oh, they just didn't get help. Well, that may or may not be true. We don't
Yeah.
really know if that's true. I mean, I
Mhm.
was reading um a response from Kay Spade's sister that
Mhm.
said they had tried many times, that she
Yeah.
had tried many times, and it was just an incredibly difficult process that um she was having a hard time with.
Yeah.
So, um whenever you hear just in front of something,
Yeah.
I'm already going to tell you if it's an oversimplified solution and version of the truth, right? So we want to be mindful of that.
Yeah. And one thing that I feel like may sound trite, um, but I'll stand by. I feel like it's true. Um, for most people, of course, have that caveat in there. Like, suicide is the only option when you feel like it's your only option.
Yeah.
Like when there's no other way out. Like no one really wakes up and is like, am I going to go to the carnival today or am I going to kill myself?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I think it just speaks to kind of a lack of empathy, and I don't mean empathy as in lack of feeling, but empathy as in understanding and feeling with, like
Yeah.
feeling alongside and kind of bearing witness to somebody else's pain, and
Mhm.
not really being able to understand how people in those very dark places can make those kinds of
Mhm.
decisions. Um, it's something that's really difficult to understand, and it's scary.
Mhm. And I think because it is so hard to understand unless you've been in a situation like that, I really feel like the oversimplifications stem from your brain trying to make sense of it.
Sure.
And this is a really weird way to explain it or a really weird example, but I think of I just got done listening to an Ono Ross and Carrie podcast
Oh,
about them going ghost hunting.
okay.
And they talk about how when something weird happens to them, they start looking for, well, what could have caused that? And like looking for scientific reasons. Um, Whereas like others, depending on your frame of reference, your worldview, all of that stuff, so many other people like immediately attribute it to ghosts or spirits or things like that
Hmm.
because that's their brain's easiest answer.
Yeah, it's like their shortcut, right? The path
Mm-hmm.
of least resistance. Yeah.
So, I mean, I will say not that it's an excuse or that even those reactions need an excuse or a pass, but I mean, they're reasonable and I think that that's why we're doing this podcast is to maybe open up some neural pathways to make it a little more like tangible almost,
Yeah, a little
accessible.
more like here are some facts, here's some
Mhm.
ways of looking at it, here's some ways of
Yeah.
thinking about it, and hopefully this expands your understanding and
Mhm.
helps you to have empathy and walking alongside folks who are really struggling.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, I think it said 1 in 5
Mhm.
Americans live with a mental health condition.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's not necessarily like a full diagnosis, like, that could be a V code, right? I would assume.
um, it didn't say, so that's a good question. Um, so I thought we could talk a little bit about depression today. Um, so depression is so the technical term major depressive disorder,
Mhm.
right? Frequently referred to as depression. That is more than just feeling sad,
Mhm.
right? So I think it's kind of made its way into common language in a way that doesn't really do justice to the condition and how
Mhm.
much it affects people's day-to-day lives. So it's more than just I feel sad today. It's more than just I'm kind of going through a tough time in my
Mhm.
life. Um, it is a mental health condition that requires medical care,
Mhm.
mental health treatment, um, and we know that the best outcomes are typically with medication and therapy together.
Mhm.
Um, and many people can and do recover.
Yeah, like and that's one thing, like, treatment is possible, like,
Yeah.
recovery is possible, hope is possible.
And even if it does happen to you again, if you have a recurrence of a depressive episode, and that may be something you have to manage over time, there
Mhm.
are tools and things you can learn to manage those things.
Exactly.
So it's estimated that about, um, so I'm on the NAMI website, so the National Alliance on Mental Health. It's a good website for info about um, anything,
Yeah.
anything and everything mental health.
NAMI's good, we love NAMI.
Yes. So it's estimated about 16 million adults had experienced one major depressive episode in the last year. Um, so within a year. And so symptoms can be different depending on the person.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're really looking at is changes in day to day functioning that last for more than 2 weeks. And the
Mm-hmm.
one common thing that all depressive episodes have in common is a depressed mood, a depressed or sad mood,
Mm-hmm.
and or loss of interest or pleasure in activities that you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one commonality. And then it can be you can see appetite changes, you can see weight changes, you can see changes in sleep, you can
Mm-hmm.
see fatigue, you can see difficulty making decisions, difficulty concentrating, feeling guilty or
Yeah.
feeling hopeless about things. Um, and you can start to have suicidal thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it doesn't have a single cause,
Right.
right? So in that nature nurture debate,
Yeah.
so it doesn't have a single cause. It can be triggered by something like a crisis in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe like a bad breakup initiated by the other person,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily. They can also occur kind of spontaneously. Like there can
Yes.
be no, not necessarily a trigger that you can point to.
Mm-hmm. And those pieces can be even harder because they may pop up and things may be going great, and then there's this internal conflict of, well, everything's going fine. Why am I not happy? Why am I not feeling good about all this?
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
that just like that's fucking fuel to the fire.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've talked a bit in terms of what to look for
Mm-hmm.
as warning signs and stuff before. I think the key thing is going back to that piece of there are multiple causes,
Yeah.
and like it's nature, nurture, and it's nature and nurture.
Yeah. So somebody said to me, I was talking to you about this earlier, it's kind of how you nurture the nature that you have.
Mhm.
So what you're born with,
Mhm.
um, in your physical body,
Yeah.
and then how you are nurtured through that by
Mhm.
significant people in your life and the environment that you live in and different things like that
Mhm.
to kind of um and that can kind of change, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you can see people who maybe have a lot of biological risk
Mhm.
for mental health conditions or
Mhm.
depression, bipolar, something like that, but yet they have a very nurturing environment,
Mhm.
very supportive people in their lives. They do good self-care. They have um, if you think about hierarchy of needs,
Mhm.
they have security
Yeah.
and all of that. So, um, and then you may not necessarily see them develop a
Mhm.
mental health condition.
Yeah, and I think another piece that's important, especially considering kind of the demographics of our audience,
Mm-hmm.
um, especially in like we live in a first world, getting access, like if you grew up middle class, access to healthcare, access to mental health care is somewhat accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to talk about I want to talk about diagnoses, how how long diagnoses stick, uh, what does that mean, like all of that stuff, and I have like 10 different thoughts in my brain about
Okay.
this.
Okay.
The first thing is like I've recently heard from a lot of people that were like, when I was 17, when I was 16, when I was whatever. And that's a part of my story. When I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Cool. And what we've learned so much even the last 5 or 6 years about brain development is your brain is not fully developed until you're 25, 26. Like for
Mm-hmm.
women it's closer to 26.
Yeah.
So much of that, like we are talking about genetic factors, we're talking or in hormones, things like that. When like I don't want to say flare-ups because I feel like that makes it sound too cutesy, but like when you do have those like giant emotional swings and downturns, like there's got to be brain development going on there.
Well, there's brain development, there's physical development,
Yeah.
those hormones turning on.
Mhm.
You're learning how to deal with stronger emotions. You're learning how to deal with social stuff,
Mhm.
which isn't necessarily like if you think about an 8-year-old compared to a 16-year-old in terms of like social standing and
Mhm.
trying to navigate all those social relationships. It's a
Mhm.
very different thing. You may be navigating romantic relationships for the first time,
Yeah.
not always, but can be earlier or later depending.
Mhm.
But you're learning to navigate those and the strong emotions that come with that.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and I think that, like, in terms of stories and timelines, it makes sense to, like, by your mid-20s kind of come out of it, but the key thing is to, like, be aware of that predisposition,
Hmm.
be aware, and I also wanna speak to the fact that, a diagnosis isn't permanent
It's not permanent.
unless we're talking, like, personality disorders and you're older than a certain age.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
or maybe like severe and persistent mental
Yeah.
illness, like schizophrenia, something like
Yeah,
that.
stuff like that.
Um, yeah, and I also wouldn't want someone to think that we just said, "Oh, I will grow out of this by the time I'm 26."
Yeah, that's not what I'm
I
saying.
mean, so if you think about early treatment and
Mhm.
intervention, is associated with better outcomes,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
Because you're learning the skills, you're laying the groundwork to kind of have strategies to help navigate some of those pieces. Thank you. And so once you kind of have developed those strategies and they're a
Mhm.
part of you, you may not experience those big highs and lows like you used to.
Mhm.
Um, or you may be taking medication
Yeah.
that kind of help rein in those
Mhm.
highs and lows. And so I think there's a lot of different things that can happen.
Mhm.
But we know that early intervention and early treatment is associated with good outcomes.
Yeah. So if you start to notice something coming up,
Mhm,
get help sooner rather than later.
mhm.
That's one key thing.
Absolutely.
Um, but has this all tie in with, like, entrepreneurship?
Well, I think that's a really great question. So
Yeah.
if you think about entrepreneurs, I say that word so weird. Um,
It's a weird word.
it's a weird word, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about kind of some of the factors that go along with entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
so long hours, a
Mhm.
lot of uncertainty, right? So that ambiguity that we go back
Oh,
to
yeah.
all the time, high pressure,
Yeah.
high stakes,
Isolation.
isolation.
I know for so many, connecting your worth, like your self-worth with your net worth and like your value.
Hmm.
Um, and there's also this piece, and this is kind of what we talked about in an earlier episode, where like you're going against society. So you're already like going through this uphill battle of
Yeah.
not being in a corporate job, not having that standardized like lifestyle, which can be freeing and it can be really hard.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially if you're not getting support,
yeah.
right? If people didn't support this project that you're super
Mhm.
passionate about and you're just kind of going it alone to like how many stories have we heard of entrepreneurs who are like, I didn't have any support. It was just all me and I was just going to prove everybody wrong and I was going to make it fucking happen.
Yeah.
But think about the pressure that that puts on you.
Mhm.
External real world pressure like I have to pay my bills,
Yeah.
as well as internal pressure,
Mhm.
right? Like I think a lot of entrepreneurs too, I could be wrong, are overachievers.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
perfectionists.
Mhm.
So they're going to work extra long, extra hard, extra whatever
Mhm.
to get to that super high level
Yeah.
rather than this strategy of good enough.
Mhm.
Where does that good enough factor in if you can never get there?
Right.
Right? Because perfection is an unattainable, I don't
Mhm.
want to say goal, but it's an unattainable state,
Right.
right? And so the harder we work for it, and we can never get there. So if you're constantly striving for perfection, you're constantly experiencing failure,
Right.
right? So that kind of just can tend to destroy um, your sense of accomplishment and self efficacy and
Mhm.
um, stuff like that. So if you think about all of that,
Yeah. Have we talked about increased anxiety? Not that we have to get into it because anxiety is our next topic.
Oh,
Like, next episode
well,
topic.
I think I talked about it more in the context of pressure. You have
Yeah.
all this pressure and you have all this ambiguous stuff going on.
Mhm.
Are you going to make your benchmarks? Are you not going to make your benchmarks? Are you going to
Mhm.
get that client? Or you're not going to get that client? And so you have to be able to be very, very good at dealing
Mhm.
with that. But we as humans, we know,
Mhm.
are not good at dealing with that. So
Yeah.
if you're dealing with that sense of uncertainty all the time, um, it ups your levels of stress. Now, think
Mhm.
about how your body, you probably don't know. I mean, I don't know how my body responds to stress specifically, but on a very basic biological level,
Mhm.
the way your body responds to stress is it elevates stress hormones like
Yeah.
cortisol. And we know that cortisol is associated with increased risk for depression.
Mhm.
So if you put all of that together
Mhm.
and kind of think, like, what am I really looking at here?
Mhm.
You have a lot of risk factors.
Well, additionally, and this is something that I don't think many people are really talking about, but one of the things that makes entrepreneurs so great is we're so passionate, right?
Yeah.
What's another not so fun word for passionate?
You tell me.
Obsessive,
Oh, yeah.
which can totally be a key indicator for an addictive personality.
Sure.
Like, um, yeah, the research is showing that entrepreneurs are statistically significantly more likely to have addictive personalities. I phrase that weird.
Oh, no, but I
Um,
know what you're saying.
yeah,
So it kind of goes with that perfectionism, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
addictive personalities. But then if you think of cultural pieces, what does addiction tend to look like, especially like amongst like functioning people, like
Mm,
higher functioning folks? Like you're gonna see higher alcohol use,
mm,
prescription abuse, things like that. Like we're talking about all about depressants essentially.
mhm.
And really any sort of addiction, like the comorbidity between addiction and depression is astronomical.
Oh, for sure.
Like,
Well, addiction and any other mental health condition, really.
yeah.
Yeah, there used to be this idea that they were kind of separate beasts.
Mhm.
And at least in the field in psychology and mental
Mhm.
health, um has been over the last however long this move to understand that having um disordered use of substances, so having substance misuse
Mhm.
and mental health is the norm for folks
Right.
rather than the exception. So if you are using substances problematically, the odds that you have an additional mental health condition
Mhm.
is super high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my challenge, like, it may not even be problematically. My challenge around maybe it's something to think about would be habitually,
Mhm.
because habits are insidious and can sneak up on us so much faster than we ever thought.
Sure.
Especially when you're isolated and you don't have people calling you on how often you're pouring that third or fourth glass of wine.
Well, I even think about like what they tell us in school about being in private practice
Mhm.
is you're acting in isolation. And when you're acting in isolation, there's more room for mistakes.
Mhm.
There's more room to have behaviors creep in that you didn't intend.
Mhm.
And, like they talk about this is a little bit disrelated, but they talk about ethics violations by therapists.
Mhm.
Usually it's not like some big thing that happens. It's
Yeah.
just this constant erosion
Mhm.
and moving towards the line and going across those lines in small,
Yeah.
unobvious ways that by the time you get there, you
Mhm.
may not really understand how you got there.
Yeah.
And I think that substance misuse can happen in the same way.
Mhm.
And and also if you think about like, um, kind of the push, push, push and drive to be
Yeah.
successful that can erode your self care in ways that don't like it doesn't happen all at once.
Yeah.
It's like death by a thousand cuts, right?
Mhm.
So like you may not notice it and
Mhm.
you're right because you're acting in isolation. You don't have someone there to say like, "Hang on a minute." Um so by the time you get to the point where you see it as a problem, you're
Mhm.
very far down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um yeah, that's it's rough. Like it sounds it sounds like entrepreneurship is this like big beast that many people don't expect to take on because there are a lot of like things to think about. There's also like good pieces that come with it. Like, yeah, there are significantly more risk factors. And I mean, every risk factor, every piece of risk has like a positive side,
Yeah.
right?
Big payoff, big reward, right?
Yeah. So I'm
Or big
not,
risk, big reward, sorry.
yeah, I'm not trying to say, well, as entrepreneurs, we're all fucked and bound to be depressed. Like,
Oh,
that's not, yeah,
not at all.
that's not my point. That's
That's
not my
not what we're saying.
goal. I realize we kind of just tore entrepreneurship apart. Like big fans, super big fans of it.
Actually, I am. I am huge. I am a huge fan of it.
It's just it's hard, and I think that in society and culture, my big thing is the cultural and societal pressure to look like you have your shit together all the fucking time,
yeah.
and that's not reasonable.
Oh, no, not at all.
It's not healthy, it's not reasonable, and I think it's so important to be able to have not even like necessarily deep relationships, but have like a network of people where you know you can trust them. And
Yes.
like even if it's just a not super connected, but then being like, I'm having a really hard time, guys, right now.
Mhm.
I know that happened to me this week actually. I had a really, really fucking rough week.
Yeah, you did.
To the point where like after some stuff happened, I needed to talk to somebody. And
Mhm.
it honestly, I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced this, but like I needed to talk to someone besides the three people that knew everything about it.
Mhm.
Um
What do you think therapists are for?
exactly. That's what life coaches are for. So just a plug. But I went to a Facebook group
Mm.
for entrepreneurs and I posted the situation and the support from people that I've like maybe exchanged a handful of likes with, the support that I got there was just so validating because support from someone outside your circle can mean so much more than support from someone inside your circle. Does that make sense?
It does make sense because the people outside your circle, I mean this in the nicest way possible,
Hmm.
but they don't care enough about
Yeah.
you to like shelter your feelings
Yeah.
or to lie to you,
Exactly.
right? So to hear like, yeah, that's kind of messed up, like from
Hmm.
somebody who is more like outside of it is
Hmm.
can be more validating. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Absolutely.
So I think like we talk about toolboxes and we talk about skills a lot.
A lot.
And I think when it comes to mental health as an entrepreneur, like that's something that we always need to be thinking about. And there's different levels and different types of skills to go to like learn to develop. Like, I guess like my like skill level would be like stage one, I need to text Tammy about something. And then like it could get to that point where I know I need to hear it from someone else.
Mhm.
But then a deeper level would be no, I'm calling Tammy. Like
Mhm.
the emergency call and stuff like that. And like
Yeah,
I
know your
know
colors. If it's like purple, okay, maybe I can text her and wait for her to get back to
yeah.
me. If it's red, no, I'm going to call her right now. Like something like I mean
Yeah.
that's pretty oversimplified, but something like that.
Um but I think like those are things that you talk about in therapy in terms of when you start to feel this, do X, Y, and Z. Okay, that didn't work. Then do X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
That didn't work.
Yeah.
So I would say like one thing is to like learn warning signs, like learn your warning signs, because I think I've kind of started addressing this as if everybody listening is going to end up being depressed at some point. I mean,
Well, even if not, I
statistically
mean,
speaking.
even if not, like and the skills and stuff that we talk about,
Hmm.
I mean, they work
Good for
for
anger. Very good for
good for
anger.
anger, good for frustration, good for
Hmm.
stress, good for a little grief when things haven't gone your way.
Yeah.
Um so like it doesn't have to be severe. It's just
Hmm.
like I think about while you were talking like so as an entrepreneur at the minimum, which is true of almost everyone, but at the minimum, you have to think about self-care and
Yeah.
how you're taking care of yourself. And
Mhm.
so that's something we've talked about before.
Yeah.
But even if you do not have major depression, even if you are not managing other mental health like anxiety or something like that, you still have to think about those things,
Yeah.
right? Because it takes a toll.
Yeah.
Because you and I were talking about physical conditions that can kind of mimic depression, and
Mhm.
there are some.
Mhm.
And if you don't take good self care,
Mhm.
you can develop some of those things like
I was gonna
thyroid
say,
issues.
well, yeah, I was gonna
Hmm.
say, like, not to beat a dead horse, but, like, we've all been hangry,
Yeah.
but then if you still don't eat, that often leads into low mood. That's one of the reasons that depression is so commonly seen with anorexia,
Mm.
is because there's not enough, like, sustenance to, like, bring, like, the essential levels up and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, our physical body can affect
Mhm.
our mood, you know?
Yeah.
And so, like, even at the minimum, if we're not taking good care of ourselves in the long run
Mhm.
and you do develop like a thyroid issue, that can definitely mimic depression, and it
Mhm.
can make you feel like you have it can do all those things.
Yeah.
So, like, you want to make sure that you're, not setting yourself up in that way.
Yeah, and I think one thing that, like, going back to the idea of diagnosis really quick, I wanna say that going back to, like, the it's not like a life sentence
Mm.
type of thing, I think one way that diagnoses are used in the field a bit are as, like, markers or guideposts, and they kinda just help you know, like, where you are and, like, is it just, like, low mood for a couple days, or has it become this other thing where, yeah, okay, like, how do we deal with this? What do we do?
Mm.
And then navigate it?
And is
Um,
it something you experienced once or something you've
mhm.
experienced kind of on a recurring basis?
Yeah. I had something else to say.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'd lost it before you said something. Well, it'll come back to me if it's important. Something about diagnoses. Oh, this is it. For so many people, a diagnosis can be one of the most goddamn empowering things ever.
Oh, totally it can. It can be like,
Like,
"Oh, there's a name for this."
oh, that's why.
Mhm.
Oh.
Yep.
Oh, there's an underlying reason and I can do something about this underlying reason? Like, can we please, 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 please stop, like, assuming that diagnoses are disempowering?
Yeah, I mean, it's different for everyone, and they can
Exactly.
be they can be incredibly empowering for
Mhm.
folks because it does help you organize and understand, and it helps to reduce feelings of isolation because 'cause you're
Mhm.
like, "Oh, this happens to other people. It's not just me."
Especially when you're so isolated as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like, especially when, like, if you're, like, a digital entrepreneur, like, really in the, like, life coaching field and stuff like that, where everyone's so fucking happy all the fucking time,
Yeah.
and then you're feeling down, guess what? You're not alone.
I know, it's so true.
Um, Also, a diagnosis lets you get services.
Mhm.
If you live in America,
You need a diagnosis
yeah.
to get access to medical care, mental health care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's right, but unless you're a cash client, you're you will be given a diagnosis so people can bill.
Yes, and we could probably take an entire podcast and talk about the pros and cons of that, but I mean,
That's
for
how it
now, that's
is.
how it is, and so you kind of have to go with that system.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been all over.
We kind of have. Yeah.
But I do want to leave folks with a couple, like, action steps for just general um mental health maintenance. That made me think, so side tangent. I saw this one chick on the interweb. It was actually someone that, like, shared what they emailed out as email marketing. Like, they were like, "Oh my god, can you believe someone did this?" This was before the Anthony Bourdain thing. It was after Kate Spade, and it was, "Forget mental health, it's about mental wealth."
What?
And it, like, used Kate Spade's image
Oh
to,
my
like,
goodness.
market their, like, mindset shit.
Oh. That's awful.
It was really bad. Like, so don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't
Please don't do that.
Please don't use someone's struggle and
Tragedy.
fight and tragedy as I feel like you shouldn't need to say that. But
Yeah.
apparently we do.
But we do.
So, in talking about mental health, this is one other thing I wanted to cover on this episode specifically. In talking about it,
Mm-hmm.
I want to say, let's talk about some do's and don'ts. If we're
Okay.
going to be talking how to talk about it in the broader culture. I'm really curious how many people are going to be like, you gave these tips and you totally contradicted yourself 20 minutes ago.
Oh.
But okay.
We make mistakes. We're not
all the time.
infallible.
The world is a world of contradictions. Share your story. Don't fucking push your story on anyone else.
Share your story if it's empowering to you.
Yeah. If it's if you feel called to, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't expect the outcomes you had of anything, of a therapy, of a drug, of an alternative or like holistic remedy. Don't expect that to be the same for someone else.
Yep.
Listen. Listen more than you fucking talk.
Yes. So if you're on the receiving end of somebody telling you something, then yes, listen.
Well, listen to the message, listen to the culture, listen before you speak.
Mm-hmm.
It took us a couple days to make this podcast because we were gathering our thoughts and getting a pulse on. That's a really bad choice. But getting a feel for what was going on.
Yeah, and what we wanted to say about it. I think there can be spur of the moment things we want to say, and there can be more thought out things we want to say. And sometimes just taking a minute, can help you with that.
Anything else for talking about it? Because I think it's not even like necessarily on social media, but I think like society kind of has to be trained a bit on how to speak on mental health because it's not something that most folks are.
Yeah, so if you're struggling, reach out to your doctor. That'd be a great place to start.
Yeah. Don't go to the internet. Like,
don't read the internet.
Please don't read the internet.
Unless you're going to go to a site like NAMI, or I really like NAMI and I really like the NIH, reputable places that are going to tell you factual things.
Yeah.
So find good sites if you are going to go on the internet. Reach out to your doctor, reach out to a therapist, reach out to a life coach, whatever works for you. Reach out to crisis lines if needed. Yeah. Those resources are there for a reason. Or if you even just have someone in your life that you feel like I really need to share this, share it with them.
Yeah.
And if you're on the receiving end of that, then listen and be there alongside the person. Yeah. And recognize they're struggling and how much courage it may have taken them to come tell you. Yeah. And help then get them into the avenues that we just talked about. Yeah. That would be most helpful for them. Yeah. Not what you were expecting? Did you want like something more concrete than that?
No.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Other piece of actionable stuff. Skills to keep the blues away. I mean, we have to be prepared for it, right? Yeah. Like as entrepreneurs, we're isolated. We have all these things kind of, I don't want to say stacked against us, but
well, definitely things you have to think about.
Yeah, considerations. One thing I would say is definitely make sure you have a couple social circles, like a handful of social options. Yep. Because feelings are weird and feelings are specific, and the person that you generally talk to every day may not be the person you want to talk to when you're feeling really down. Yep. Or I don't know, so things like that.
The number one thing we know helps people to feel better when their mood is low is to go do something they enjoy. Yes. And paradoxically, that is something you almost never feel like doing when your mood is low. So finding something you do like that you can do. Yeah. It doesn't have to be some grand thing, but it could be going for a walk with your dog.
Exactly. I was just going to say that.
Yep. It can be going to a restaurant you like, even if it's just get takeout or have it delivered, something that makes you feel good. It can be, turning on that show that you've been meaning to watch and just taking a hot minute and doing that. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be something big, complicated, or extravagant or extreme. It can be smaller things, but things that make you feel good. Yeah. And we know from research that is effective in helping people improve mood.
And I will say, like, I know there's definitely research around aromatherapy and different scents help raise mood.
Well, I don't know that there's research around aromatherapy specifically, but I mean, there is this idea that scents and like our senses can help calm and soothe us and can help
like reinvigorate, re-energize.
Yes.
Make you think of happy times.
So usually there's like one sense that people connect with, not always. And so you can think about, what are the tastes that I connect with that make me feel good? What are the scents that I connect with that make me feel good? What do I like to look at? What are the textures that I like?
Yeah.
Maybe like pictures of people that you love, or pictures of your dog, or pictures of things that are empowering to you. Kind of like that idea of a vision board, right? Yeah. Things that are empowering to you. Things like that. So any way that you can kind of connect with your senses can help be soothing and grounding.
And I would say the other piece is checking in around if you're sad about anything you can change, because so much time depression stems from like rumination on things of the past.
Yeah, so depression tends to be kind of past focused, but trying to focus on things that you can control.
Yeah, can control.
Be very helpful.
Focusing on the present, like, doesn't like just really being mindful, staying in the moment. The other piece, wow, I'm not good with holding thoughts today. It's gone.
But those are all good ideas. And I think that if you're doing those things and you're still finding like impacts in your mood and changes in sleep and changes in appetite and low mood and lack of interest that's gone on for 2 weeks and for more than 2 weeks and is really distressing and changing your day-to-day functioning, and you do try these things and they're not seeming to help, then that's the time to
talk to someone.
Time to talk to somebody, doctor, life coach, therapist, somebody to get some professional help and interventions for ideas and things that you can do to, because that's what we're here for. Yeah, that's our job.
That is our job. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the first in this specified series of topics. Next one we're going to do is anxiety, I think. We're going to be hitting a couple key topics, continuously throwing in all actionable steps, because we're all about that. And yeah, we'll talk with you guys later.
Bye, friends.
Bye, guys. All right, that wraps up another episode of the Sugar and Spikes podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and if you want to keep up with all of my fun day-to-day shenanigans, then go ahead and follow me across all the social media. I am at DezWMsMBA, so DezWMsMBA. I'm talking Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm everywhere. My Insta stories are so good. Also, if you like what we're doing, if you're kind of mediocre about what we're doing, any of that stuff, please leave a review, share it with someone. If you don't like us, but maybe you know someone that may like us, share it with them. Leave a review, comment, all that fun stuff on iTunes. And also, I would like to thank Forget the Whale for use of their song Move Along as our theme music. And if you haven't already, then go to DesireeW.com, find your legendary leadership style, and let me know what it is, because I'm dying to know. And remember to stay unavailable for fuckery.